Painshill, also referred to as Painshill in some 19th century texts, near Cobham, Surrey, England, is one of the finest remaining examples of an 18th century English landscape park. It was designed and created between 1738 and 1773 by the Honourable Charles Hamilton MP. The original house built in the park by Hamilton has since been demolished. Painshill is owned by Elmbridge Borough Council and managed by the Painshill Trust. Painshill, which is open to the public with entry charge, has been Grade I listed on the Register of Historic Parks and Gardens. In 1998, Painshill was awarded the Europa Nostra Medal for the exemplary restoration from a state of extreme neglect of a most important 18th century landscape park and its extraordinary buildings. In May 2006, Painshill was awarded full collection status for its John Bartram Heritage Collection by the National Council for the Conservation of Plants and Gardens (NCCPG). History. Charles Hamilton was born in 1704 in Dublin, the 9th son and 14th child of the 6th Earl of Abercorn. He was educated at Westminster School in Oxford, and went on 2 grand tours, one in 1725 and a further one in 1732. In 1738 Hamilton began to acquire land at Painshill and, over the years, built up a holding of more than 200 acres (0.81 square kilometers). His creation was among the earliest to reflect the changing fashion in garden design prompted by the landscape movement, which started in England in about 1730. It represented the move away from geometric formality in garden design to a new naturalistic formula. Many of the trees and shrubs planted by Hamilton were sent to him from Philadelphia by the naturalist John Bartram. The garden was open to respectable visitors, who were shown around by the head gardener for a tip, and was visited by many well-known figures, including 2 visits by William Gilpin, pioneer of the picturesque, Thomas Jefferson with John Adams, and Prince Franz of Anhalt-Dessau separately, on special tours of gardens, and the important landscape garden author Thomas Whately. Then as now there was a particular route round the park recommended, designed to bring the visitor upon the successive views with best effect. Views from Painshill were painted on plates for a Wedgwood service of porcelain commissioned by Catherine the Great of Russia. Hamilton eventually ran out of money and sold the estate in 1773 to Benjamin Bond Hopkins, who held the estate until his death in 1794. In 1778 Hopkins commissioned architect Richard Jupp to rebuild Painshill House in a different location within the park. The house was later extended in the 19th century by architect Decimus Burton and is now a Grade II listed building. Henry Laws Luttrell, 2nd Earl of Carhampton, August 7, 1743 – April 25, 1821 bought Painshill in 1807 from William Moffat. Luttrell lived at Painshill after having fled from the magnificent ancestral Luttrellstown Castle near Clonsilla outside Dublin, where his notorious role in crushing the Irish Rebellion in 1798 made it unsafe to stay. His ancestor Colonel Henry Luttrell had been assassinated in Dublin in 1717 for betraying the Irish to King William III of England. After his death in 1821, Luttrell's wife Jane lived at Painshill until her death in 1831 when it was sold to Sir William Cooper, High Sheriff of Surrey. Sir William Cooper and his wife, later his widow, lived there until 1863, and installed Joseph Brahma's suspension bridge and waterwheel, and planted an arboretum designed by John Claudius Loudon. In 1873, the English poet, literary and social critic, Matthew Arnold, rented Painshill Cottage from Mr. Charles Jalliffe and lived there until his death in 1888. In 1904 Charles Gould of Cobham Park purchased and lived in Painshill Park, his son having moved into Cobham Park. Until World War II Painshill Park was held by a succession of private owners. In 1948 the estate was split up and sold in separate lots for commercial uses. The park, as such, soon disappeared and its features fell into decay. By 1980 the local authority, Elmbridge Borough Council, had bought 158 acres (0.64 square kilometers) of Hamilton's original estate and the work of restoring the landscape garden and its many features could start. In the following year the Painshill Park Trust was founded as a registered charity with the remit to restore Painshill as nearly as possible to Charles Hamilton's original concept of a landscaped garden for the benefit of the public. Fortunately there is a wealth of 18th century images of the main features of Painshill to help the process. The restoration of this Grade I landscape is continuing. In 2013 work was completed on the restoration of the Crystal Grotto. Further restoration work in the park is dependent on the availability of funding. The landscape garden continues to be a favorite location for film and television production, such as for the grounds of Bridgeford University in Trinity TV series and the exteriors in the latest movie adaptation of Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray 2009 film. In 2017, Painshill Park was featured in the science fiction television series Black Mirror, episode Hang the DJ. The park now borders the A3 road, which is invisible and inaudible from nearly all parts, but allows easy access. Description: today Painshill comprises 158 acres 0.64 square kilometers of the original more than 200 acres 0.81 square kilometers owned by Charles Hamilton in the 18th century. The landscape garden stretches along the banks of the winding River Mole on land that has a number of natural hills and valleys. The central feature is a serpentine lake of 14 acres 0.057 square kilometers with several islands and spanned by bridges and a causeway. The water for the lake and the plantings is pumped from the River Mole by a 19th century beam engine powered by a water wheel. Hamilton enhanced the views of hills and lake by careful plantings of woods, avenues, and specimen trees to create vistas in a number of discrete environments which include an amphitheater, a water meadow and an alpine valley. As focal points in the vistas and as sympathetic elements to be discovered in the landscape, Hamilton placed a number of follies, small decorative buildings, which include a grotto, Gothic temple, ruins of a Gothic abbey, a Roman mausoleum, and a Gothic tower with a view of the countryside. All these still exist and have been restored, and the hermitage for which a hermit was hired on a 7-year contract, but soon dismissed for absenteeism and Turkish tent have been recreated. The Crystal Grotto was restored in 2013, and reopened by Lady Lucinda Langton. The Roman Temple of Bacchus has been reconstructed 2018, though there is now a cast of the Roman statue of Bacchus which it housed, among other antiquities bought on Hamilton's Italian tours. Among the original plantings are a number of important specimens including fine examples of cork oak, yew, beech, silver birch, and 3 cedars of which one, known as the Great Cedar, is 120 feet 37 m high and over 100 feet 30 m in width, and is thought to be the largest cedar of Lebanon in Europe. In 2010, a conference at Painshill brought together elements of the restoration of this 18th century landscape garden.